Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 95, Tuesday, October 17th, 2023.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm joined, as always, by the Debbie Reynolds to my Betty Davis, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Oh, thanks, Courtney. Thanks for giving me Debbie Reynolds. You know how much I love her.
She is such a gem. And we have a gem joining us as well for a second time as a guest of the show for our author interview. Spencer Wright, author of Voices Behind the Magic and the Enchanted Disney Stories of Walt, Hollywood, and Live Action Film. Spencer last appeared on episode 64 to discuss Voices Behind the Magic, and we are pleased to welcome him back to share more regarding his latest publication, The Enchanted Disney. Spencer is from Pennsylvania and serves as a freelance contributor for wdwinfo.com. He also serves as host of the podcast Walt's Oasis, which discusses animals and the people who helped create them from the world of Disney. Welcome back, Spencer.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Spencer, we're so excited to have you back. While we've read 30 books since we last talked to you, it really isn't that long ago since you were on our show. Congratulations, you wrote a whole nother book.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So we want to jump right in. This was so much fun. This book is focused on live action, whereas Voices Behind the Magic was focused on animated features. What did you want to celebrate Disney's live action films for, specifically for the centennial celebration?
Partially what I wanted to celebrate them for is because I was worried they were becoming overlooked a little bit. There are still many live action hits that are beloved, like Mary Poppins and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But there's others that aren't on Disney Plus, don't get watched as much. And then as a result, there's a lot of stories and chapters of the Walt Disney Company's history that also do not get told.
Yeah, I loved how deep you went in this book. I would say this is the intersection of if you are a fan of Disney and also a fan of Turner Classic Movies, this is the book for you. I think we got to get you on the Turner Classic Movie Disney Cruise charter that they do every year.
Oh, absolutely. And the goal, too, is that it's a good resource if you're pretty expert with Disney history. There's going to be a lot in here that you haven't read before. And if you love old movies, then there's a lot about Disney that you're not going to know either.
It was a really nice intersection. I mean this in the nicest way. It reminded me of the fun that I have going through the IMDb trivia page and just making all of those little connections. So that was such a delight.
It's always fun to find those connections.
Yeah, well, how would you say, let's make some connections here, how are Disney's live action films just as magical as their animated features?
They were made with the same level of care during Walt Disney's lifetime. We put the same amount of attention into them as animated films. A lot of times people who began in the animation wing of the studio transitioned to working on the live action films. And, they take inspiration from the larger Hollywood landscape, while also having touches that are specifically Disney. One sort of trope is the idea of, a lot of the movies having a very lovable animal. And they're definitely part of a brand. When you see a Disney live action movie, typically it's pretty recognizable as a Disney movie.
Something I really enjoyed was thinking about how I think of this question, the movie magic, those practical effects that we love so much, like the Mary Poppins bag of just continuously pulling stuff out of her carpet bag, or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, how they made a prop look like a giant submarine in this huge voyage. And those things are just so cool that in animation, there's a beautiful art form to special effects. I love how they can create water through animation. But that is something that's just really cool in movie magic that just seems so nostalgic and classic to me.
Yeah, and I like how too you can see if you watch, because I'd watch sometimes a lot like in a row over certain days, and you can see a lot of the same names in credits, and you can see how versatile a lot of the same individuals are: directors, producers, set designers, and how they were able to churn out these films but also keep a high degree of quality.
So when you were writing this book, what did you learn from writing and publishing Voices Behind the Magic that then you applied to the Enchanted Disney?
One overarching concept, I would say pretty much since the beginning, and we're at a century now of the Walt Disney Company, is a focus on always having the highest level of quality. And that is definitely an arc between the animated films and the live action. One of the big things, too, is I had a lot of great resources that I knew of, both online and in person, especially since this was during the pandemic. And also, how complicated of a person Walt Disney could be. That was also definitely an overarching theme. In a lot of ways, he was sort of a country farm boy. And that was an era that he loved. And we see it in movies I discussed, like So Dear to My Heart, or A Love of Main Street, like you see in Lady and the Tramp, which I discuss in Voices Behind the Magic. But then you also see him always looking toward the future and new technologies.
Yeah, your research is to be commended for sure. The last 100 pages of this book is the bibliography. So, we always love to leave our listeners with resources, and you certainly leave your reader with so many. How did you go about doing the research for this book?
Really, I split. So the format of the book is I have 15 people who appeared in live action films for Disney, and I discuss a little bit of their life and work, and then also their work on a live action film and any other connections they may have to Disney, or their connections to Walt's life. So relevant to today when we're recording, it's the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company being founded. In chapter 1, I discuss Pola Negri, who appeared in 1964's The Moonspinners. And she's not a name, very many people know today, but in the 20s, in the silent era, she was a top star in Hollywood. So I discussed what that meant, what lavish Hollywood was like in the 20s versus Walt's arrival less than a year after hers in Hollywood, which was a lot more modest. He arrived basically with literally a cardboard suitcase with a few possessions and $40. So I discussed what was Hollywood like in 1923, and then how are things different for both of these individuals by the 1960s. So it's a lot of breaking down these little chunks. What was Hollywood like as a whole in the 1920s? What was Walt's life like? What was, a star's life like at that time? And so for me, I kind of have a little bit of a restless mind. So the jumping around is a lot, but if you stay organized, then you're always learning and reading something new. Basically, my goal is every day I'm learning something new. So the basic format was Walt's life in his studio, the film I'm discussing, as well as the person I'm discussing.
So I'm sure you had to watch a lot of films. How does watching a Disney film change for you when you're watching them for fun? And now that you've been doing a lot of writing, both animated for Voices Behind the Magic and now for live action films, how has watching a Disney film changed for you?
Well, if I watch the same film over and over, and there are quite a few that I did, I might look out for different things. And one thing I started to notice a lot more, this was especially true rewatching Swiss Family Robinson, which was filmed on Tobago in the Southern Caribbean, is I really start to notice the landscapes and the settings where a lot of these movies were filmed. The Walt Disney Studio was quite active in filming on location in an era where it wasn't very common. Most studios tended to film strictly on sound stages, or they might go to locations around California or into Arizona. But the Disney studio didn't hesitate to go to Europe, Canada, all these, like Tobago, all these beautiful places. And I did start to notice a lot of these details. Also the role of music, which is very similar to the animated films. So now when I watch them, I do start to see a lot of similarities and really just see the bigger picture and how beautiful these films are, which isn't something I necessarily would have noticed as a child.
Oh, of course. I can absolutely imagine you approach it with a whole new eye. Well, with 100 years in the legacy, there are so many different live action actors. How did you narrow down who made it into the book?
The main way I narrowed down is I wanted to make sure I was covering an appropriate swath of time, as well as an adequate number of films. So I directly discuss about 25 different live action films that are Disney related. And then I do discuss the history of the movies, in particular in Los Angeles. So I do talk about the silent film era, which was in the teens and 20s, the era of the big studios, which went into the mid 50s and beyond, and people who straddle these different eras. So you mentioned Debbie Reynolds, and she was there for what she called the last gasp of the studio system. So discussing her and her life is a great way to see, how did making movies change as these big studios fell apart, and things transitioned to just movies being made here and there and into television. So it's a lot of new worlds that aren't always explored, even within Disney history. For example, silent film is a really fascinating world in and of itself.
I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the silent film era too, when Disney shortly moving into more talking pictures, how Disney set up a little bit away. They were in Burbank, like a little further away from other major studios, and major studios were cool with that. Like how Disney kind of set himself like, I'm part of this, but I'm doing my own thing. I'm not part of the classic system in a way. I thought that was interesting given space.
Yeah, and I'm glad they were a very respected studio. I think part of it, what helped, especially in the 30s and 40s, is they were making animated full-length films, which other studios weren't doing, or not doing very often. And they weren't churning out film after film after film. So they didn't necessarily pose a threat. And in particular, the silly symphonies, which were made from 1929 to 1939, often enhanced a bill. So a bill might include like a newsreel, a travelogue, a cartoon short, and then a movie.
And I can imagine those relationships then that Disney is building to add in silly symphonies, Mickey Mouse cartoons at the beginning of other people's features helped get him access and meet some of these stars who then would end up in his live action films.
Yeah, absolutely. And it created a respectable name. Walt and the co-founder, his brother Roy, were always respectful, ethical, upstanding. So they were definitely, people that others wanted to work with. And they stuck with creating family-friendly fare, which was especially important as we go into the 60s.
I think also probably helpful with, because in the studio system, all those contracts, a star's image is so branded. Like we think celebrities have a brand today, and they do, but the type of branding that they did in the 30s, 40s, and 50s for those stars, because you were so heavily linked to one studio, I'm sure Disney's brand, their brand didn't necessarily conflict very much with what other studios wanted to see their stars do, which might have made it easier for them to pick up stars and have some single contracts.
Well, it was especially appreciated by people who went to work in the live action films at Disney, is a lot of times these films were made once the studio system started to fall apart. And once that contract system ended, and you're absolutely right that they were under strict contract and had an image that was imposed on them, usually. Like they were told, this is your image, this is how you're going to look, this is how you're going to act, this is where you're going to go. And then they show up at Disney's and their talents are respected and they're treated with respect, and their individual talents are celebrated.
I'm curious if there's maybe a short list of a few people that you wanted to add, maybe had to cut, anyone in mind for a possible volume 2?
Yeah, one of them is someone I love named Mary Wicks. And she was a character actress from about the 40s into the 90s. She played a lot of secretaries, sassy nurses, that type. And she was in Under Touchstone, the Sister Act movies.
Oh, okay.
And what I think is, and she also provided the live action reference for Cruella de Vil.
Oh, interesting.
And I think what's interesting about her is that she was on these sets for Touchstone in the early 90s, and she came from a similar era as Walt. And she was very, proper, had great manners, poise, things of that nature. And then she's on sets where people are using profanity, or movies with more adult themes. And I imagine how her reaction might contrast to that of, say, Walt's reaction, because she's from that same era.
So I just did a quick Google search because the name was familiar, but the face wasn't coming to me. And I absolutely loved her in Sister Act. I can see it, the Cruella de Vil reference, but I also loved her in Trouble with Angels, was one of my favorites growing up as a kid.
She's in one of my favorite movies. It's actually a Betty Davis movie, Now Voyager.
Oh, yes. Okay. Love that film.
She's one of those that once you see, she's in everything.
Since we're talking about films, there are so many films for readers to watch after reading your book. If you had to recommend 3, we're gonna make you pick favorite children here. What would be top 3 recommendations? And then afterwards, I'm sure Courtney and I have a couple we want to share as well.
1949's So Dear to My Heart. It's a film that's mostly live action. It has some animation, and that's a film I would definitely recommend. That was one of the very early sort of live action efforts of the studio. It's not on Disney Plus, and I'm not really sure why, but it's a movie that very much connects to the simple farm life. It was a movie that Walt Disney was heavily involved in making, and it's really just a very simple, charming film. The next one I would definitely recommend is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yes.
And that was the first fully live action film the studio made in the United States. They made a few in England in the early 50s. And, that's one where you really see this transition to them using technology. They build the Nautilus, they build the giant squid, and it was released at the same time as around the same time as Lady and the Tramp and Disneyland opening. And if one of those 3 were not a success, then the studio would have been in very, very serious trouble. So it's definitely a very important historical milestone. And it's in the parks in varying degrees. And I would say as a third, probably Mary Poppins, because that's another one that its success was very, very important, especially in terms of funding Walt Disney World. So I always think it's sort of funny how much P.L. Travers, the author of Mary Poppins, hated Disneyland, and yet the success of Mary Poppins helped to fund Walt Disney World.
And then we get a whole movie about that, like the live action meta-ness there. One of the things that I liked about your book was how rich it was, as I said, in mentioning those non-Disney films. So I'm going to pick one non-Disney and one Disney to recommend. So Disney first. If just one person listening to this podcast goes and watches Blackbeard's Ghost, I would be delighted, because that is a hidden gem that I only discovered recently because of Disney Plus in the pandemic. Actually, thanks to previous guest and co-host of Disorder, Michael Lyons. They did it as one of their monthly picks, and that movie is so fun. So Elsa Lanchester and Suzanne Pleshette, who are both chapters within your book, have some shout outs there, as well as the wonderful Peter Ustinov. So that is my Disney pitch. And then sticking with Suzanne Pleshette, when I saw her name in the book chapter, just, previewing, I was like, oh my gosh, I hope he talks about 40 Pounds of Trouble with Tony Curtis. And you did not disappoint me, because I too picked up a copy for $8 on Amazon sometime within the past year. I think my husband and I were watching something completely unrelated to Disney. Maybe it was a Tony Curtis interstitial on TCM. And we're like, that looks like he's on Mr. Toad. What is this? I'm Googling it. And we find out there's a whole movie with 20 minutes filmed at Disney. It's a Universal picture, which you certainly would not think, especially not today, given the competition between those two companies. Really cute romantic comedy of the 1960s. If you're going to watch as a Disney fan, as you pointed out, there's definitely stuff you're like, that doesn't make sense. Kind of like when you're watching an ABC show where they go to Disney and then they walk from Magic Kingdom to Epcot or whatever, just some of the layout in there. But as a Disney fan and as a fan of classic cinema, I would recommend that to our listeners. And as I said, I was thrilled to see that you mentioned it as well.
Yeah, and she's someone that's come up a lot when people mentioned, I'm so glad you covered her. It's her and Agnes Moorehead are the two.
Yeah. I mean, I'll throw Citizen Kane in there as well, because any excuse to watch that one. I only recently learned that, I just, in watching Citizen Kane, I think of Agnes Moorehead and I think of Eudora in Bewitched. I might have gotten her name wrong, but the mom in Bewitched. And then I was like, wait, I was looking at the IMDb cast list. I was like, Agnes Moorehead, that Agnes Moorehead? So of course, her Disney connection with Pollyanna, which you touch on as well. So I'm glad you've gotten that fun feedback.
Some of my favorites. I really enjoyed, Courtney, when we did our summer cinema series and reading a lot of original texts and comparing them to films. You and I have really started to dive more into the live action.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed. You were always stronger than I was with live action. So I'm really enjoying my education. But I am going to push to watch Treasure Island, because that is the first Disney live action film. And I had a lot of fun when we read that together and then compared it to the live action film as well as the other iterations of Treasure Island that Disney's made. But I always think there's something cool about the first. And then I also really enjoyed, if people have been following us and you read with us when we read Haley Mills' memoir, I really do think watching all of Haley Mills' movies like in order, and she pops up a lot because she made 6 films with Disney. She got to work with a lot of these people. So through that 60s, watching her grow up on film, but also watching Disney evolve, it's really interesting that you can do like a case study of her films, see a lot of these actors as well, and see how Disney evolves in live action. And then another plug I want to make was, this was something, I think it was pandemic watching for me, or it was post when I left the Disney College program and I, felt nostalgic and, missing Disney every day. I did a watch of all the films in the Great Movie Ride that you would go through all the scenes. And that was a fun journey. So for some non-Disney, even though Mary Poppins and Fantasia is definitely in there, I highly recommend that if you're kind of looking like, how do I connect back to the parks? Anyone nostalgic for the Great Movie Ride? Watch through the scenes in order. It'll kind of feel like a cool way to go through some live action films.
This book made me miss the Great Movie Ride. I mean,
So
I always
much.
miss the Great Movie Ride, but I was like, man, I'm really in my feels right now. We got references to Casablanca with Peter Lorre, Singing in the Rain with Debbie Reynolds, Wizard of Oz with Ray Bolger.
That's
in my
one thing where
feels.
YouTube was so helpful, because
I bet.
I could watch and see the different angles of the attraction, because attractions that closed well before the Great Movie Ride, you really can't.
No.
See the whole
20,000
thing.
Leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Spencer, did you have a favorite movie scene in Great Movie Ride?
It was that Wizard of Oz scene.
Iconic.
That was so beautiful. But it's interesting because I love that. Like I would ride that attraction over and over again.
I really liked the montage at the end. I know it updated a few times over the years that I spent visiting the parks. But I would always play a game with my family where we would count how many of those we had seen. So kind of like Emily, I would start to seek out more of those so that I could boost my numbers in the final count.
I always enjoyed Casablanca. Courtney knows this. It's my favorite. I wrote a paper on it in college because I could. They were like, pick any topic in U.S. pop culture. And I was like, Casablanca, we're going for it.
One of our shared favorites as well is Singing in the Rain. Yeah. So I know we did something similar when we did Voices Behind the Magic, where Emily and I picked a few chapters of yours that we wanted to just dive a little deeper into. So I would love to start out with Debbie Reynolds, if you have anything you'd like to share about her chapter with our listeners. You don't have to go too deep because, of course, we want them to read it. Any little fun teasers or things we'd like to discuss.
Okay. Yeah, so Debbie Reynolds, she was an actress who was prominent from the 50s right up until the early 2000s. And she was what she described as a last gasp of the studio system. So she signed on at Warner Brothers and MGM. And so she did see these sort of grand, beautiful movie factories right before they collapsed in the mid-50s. She's probably most known for being in Singing in the Rain. And she is the grandmother. She's Aggie in the Halloween Town films.
Yes.
And then probably the third thing she's most known for is being the mother of Carrie Fisher, who's Princess Leia.
So many connections there. Emily, was there something in specific that you enjoyed particularly from her chapter?
So I found her so interesting. One, of course, gravitated to her because of Singing in the Rain, and also it's spooky season. We love Halloween Town. But I thought she was so interesting that the connection she has with Disney, because she didn't star in a Disney film until much later compared to some of the other actors in this book. But she has so many connections beforehand. She was at Disneyland on opening day, so you can see her there. She wrote It's a Small World with Walt. She got to help present Walt with, where is it? presented Walt with a milestone award from the Screen Producers Guild at the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel. So like she has so many touches to Walt Disney before she even got to be in a film. And part of me is like so surprised that she didn't get into one earlier.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she just wasn't. I thought that too. And also, she never visited Hollywood studios.
Really?
Right? Like, I want her handprints in front of our Chinese theater.
I'm shocked.
Well, when it was MGM Studios early on, I think it opened in 89 or 1990, they invited stars from that era all the time.
Right. They'd have a star of the day.
Yeah, because she would have been a perfect star of the day.
Gene Kelly has footprints, right? I mean, I know he like had an animatronic in the ride, so I guess that makes sense, but...
Yeah, and Sid Charisse, who was in Singing in the Rain, she also has... So I'm not sure why she never went. I know she loved Disneyland, and she repeatedly visited Disneyland.
I have a little Debbie Reynolds shade to throw, though. So this is just personal. I love Debbie Reynolds. Do not get me wrong, but I do remember reading one of her autobiographies. I want to say it was Make 'Em Laugh. It might have been one of her others. She has 3, and I've read them all over the years. But this is just my attuned Disney fan eye. She does share that she was at Disneyland on opening day. So I was glad that you could corroborate that for us in your book. But she tells that she was riding on It's a Small World with Walt Disney, and he turned to her and, shared how excited he was for her park. And I was like, Debbie, Disneyland opened in 1955, and It's a Small World didn't come until after the 1964 World's Fair. So that sounds fake, but okay. So at least we validated she was there, but I guess she was just misremembering what attraction she was on, or conflating her memory.
Yeah, she's one of those. She did so much in her life that she gets things scrambled a little
I
bit.
gave her a pass, but I was like, that just set off my little Disney fan alarm bells when I read that a few years ago.
Yeah, there are pictures of her there on opening day, so at least we know she was definitely there.
Yeah, she was in Adventureland, I think, opening day.
So she must have been on the Jungle Cruise. I'm thinking she was like, I'm on a boat, and that would have been the only boat she could have been on.
But you also said she went several times, like she frequented Disney, so she could have also very well have ridden It's a Small World with Walt.
Not on opening day.
Not on opening day.
That's just me being nitpicky. Sorry, Debbie Reynolds. May you rest in peace. I wanted to share that with people who would appreciate that.
I'm also really bummed that her collection, like, I was heartbroken. If we got that museum that she was collecting all of these things from, like, who knows? That could have been, oh man. I mean, thinking about like all the exciting things we're seeing with Disney 100, with the Walt Disney 100 exhibit that was just at the Franklin Institute, and like we're really enjoying all of this history. I would have loved an old Hollywood museum like that she was collecting, like all of Marilyn Monroe's dresses, set pieces from Showboat, like amazing.
Every time I see the new Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Museum that opened within the last 2 years in Los Angeles, I like to think that in a way that's Debbie Reynolds' dream realized, but she didn't get to live to see it. I mean, I know it's, it wasn't what she envisioned, or she didn't have a part in it as far as I'm aware, but I'm like, oh, she wanted that so bad.
Yeah. So for people who aren't aware, when the massive studios were really being sold off and sort of shut down in the 60s, they kept things like all their props, scripts, drawings, costumes going back into the 20s, and a lot of times the stuff was just getting thrown in the trash.
Wild.
Or sold to thrift stores or auctioned off for pennies. So she made every effort to save and buy as much as she could with the hopes of opening a museum. So I mean, she was successful in saving a lot of stuff that would have been thrown away, but basically her whole life was dedicated to trying to save this museum, going into debt, working as much as she could to, trying to avoid bankruptcy and having to auction the items off. So reading it, it's just horrible because you just hear all these wonderful artifacts that are sort of getting thrown away, that at the time were kind of just seen as trash. One of the pairs of the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz, that's how they were found. They were just found in a dumpster in a box.
Yeah,
wrapped in tissue paper.
I can't even imagine. Well, maybe, Courtney, we can imagine that when she had to sell off the collection, that someone bought them into their private collection and then gave them to the new museum. So maybe they, through roundabout ways,
found their way there. Emily, who did you want to talk about a little deeper?
I want to talk about Maureen O'Hara. I absolutely love her. The Quiet Man and McClintock are staples in my house. We watch McClintock every Thanksgiving. Like after dinner, it's McClintock, and then it's Prep and Landing. Two very random pairings, but it's what we do. I've shared several times on the show. I grew up in my grandmother's house, was often my babysitter, and this is what we watched. So I was watching McClintock since I was like 7 years old in the 90s and early 2000s. I could recite that film for the last 20 years. And I just love Maureen O'Hara, and she's just so much fun to watch on screen. I love that she was called like the Queen of Technicolor, and probably because of her red hair. The way she just came across on screen is beautiful. But there's a really funny story. So talking about her with the Parent Trap that I want to talk about. I liked how there's this kind of back and forth where she loved working with Disney and the creative license they gave her on screen. And that in the Parent Trap, she mentioned she really liked having the opportunity to play a non-conventional family. Like divorce was a hard thing to talk about in the 50s and 60s, putting that on screen. And she loved that she got to play a non-conventional family that is a reality for so many people. But she also struggled a lot with Walt when it came to like her contract, and when it came like she had to really fight to get her full bill. They wanted to pay her $25,000 when she's normally a $75,000 actress. When it came to billing, she was supposed to have top billing, and then it read on the release, Walt Disney presents Haley Mills and Haley Mills in The Parent Trap, starring Maureen O'Hara and Brian Keith. So she actually came third if you're counting Haley Mills twice. So there's a lot of back and forth there that I thought was interesting. But a funny story, which is an alleged thing that Walt said, was when he was in the hospital, a brother of O'Hara's agent was one of Walt's doctors. And when he mentioned, oh, I know Maureen, apparently he allegedly said, quote, that B. And then Maureen O'Hara apparently nonchalantly said, quote, I don't mind what Walt said. He didn't like me because I wouldn't let him out of a contract. Not many people had the guts to stand up to him. At least he didn't say that wimp, end quote. And I just thought that was amazing. I loved that story.
Yeah, she was a tough lady in a tough industry.
And I think they had that mutual respect because Walt also was very by the contract as well. Like he made sure, he's been snubbed so many times in that industry that he made sure that he was getting what he was worth. So even though they butted heads, I like to think they had that mutual respect at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. And, again, she also pushed back. A lot of people with Walt did not push back. They would just sort of accept it. Or maybe they would work at the studio once or twice for relatively low pay for the idea of being in a high quality, family friendly Disney film and just kind of accept it. And she didn't. They wanted to pay her $25,000, which is a third of her $75,000 minimum. And she's like, no.
She knew her worth.
She did.
Courtney, it reminded me of something we talked about in one of our recent episodes, how like Imagineers and other people who had those moments to be candid with Walt and they were like afraid in the moment. But then you kind of find over time as we see more of these stories that Walt appreciates that candidness. So to me, this was another story that corroborated with that.
Yeah, I saw that with Jim Cora for sure on our last episode. And I have a pick. So Debbie Reynolds was our shared pick. Maureen O'Hara was Emily's. And mine is Elsa Lanchester. I am also a huge fan of the Universal Monsters. And though she only appears on screen for 5 minutes or so as the Bride of Frankenstein, I love her. She is a wonderful character actress in the Disney films you mentioned, like That Darn Cat, Blackbeard's Ghost, and of course Katie, Nana, and Mary Poppins. But I was so glad to see you go in depth with her relationship with another character actor or profound actor of his generation, her husband, Charles Laughton. We are big fans of Witness for the Prosecution in this household. So I appreciate that got like at least 2 paragraphs in the chapter.
Yeah, I love Elsa Lanchester and her husband, Charles Laughton. Anything they're in.
I was bummed to learn from there that Charles Laughton had been considered for a Disney role, and then they're like, nope, never mind. And I was like, oh, we could have had it.
Yeah, he didn't want to work with Maurice Chevalier, who also gets a chapter.
Yes, he does.
And it's not really clear why. The main thing I would have loved to have seen is in the 30s on the stage, Elsa Lanchester was Peter Pan,
yes,
and Charles Laughton was Captain Hook.
What a delight.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I would love a time machine.
to go back and see that specifically. I'll be right there with you.
I also would have loved to have heard them do some voice.
Yeah, they would have been good at it.
I'm going to give a shout out to that Maurice Chevalier chapter because Gigi was also a staple in my house. So I loved him in that. And I like that he talked about how even Maureen O'Hara, similarly, how they knew how to evolve as actors. Like he knew as he was getting older, he has to, his tone now is not the love interest. His tone now is the funny grandparent or uncle, the comic relief. And Maureen O'Hara said the same thing about Hollywood can cast me all they want as a mother. I'm going to have so much fun playing different versions of mothers. Adapting. And I think that's what helped them stay relevant as well, especially in an age that wasn't very, even now, that's not very kind to aging actors.
No, especially in their like 30s, 40s. Once a woman hit about mid-20s, they had to start to worry. And luckily that's changed quite a bit. But Maureen O'Hara, the fact that she was still looking beautiful and she was 40 in The Parent Trap was remarked on in some sources.
So Spencer, is there someone that you would like to talk about? Someone who particularly stood out to you in this research?
Yes. So one thing, this is going to be like a 5, 10 or more year project, but I'm working on a biography of Iris Adrian. She was a character actress she was in The Love Bug and That Darn Cat. She played a lot of sort of loud, brassy women, that type of thing. She was in over 100 movies, and then she had small roles in about 10 Disney movies. Yeah, so she was chapter 4. So she played what she described as tough broads who were never mean. And so she's interesting because later in life, she played a lot of these sort of really loud, shrill diner waitresses. She was the landlady in That Darn Cat.
Yeah, I just Googled a picture because I read her chapter, but the face wasn't coming to me. And now I see her.
Well, it's interesting what you were just saying, too, about how over time people accept changes and adapt to it, because the title of the biography of her will probably be A Firecracker with Sex Appeal, The Life and Work of Iris Adrian. Because in the 30s, she was an extremely popular showgirl dancer in New York City. But then you see her as like the car hop in The Love Bug.
She's versatile.
Yeah, so what she said is she's playing the same babe, just older.
I love that. Well, how would you like to see Disney honor their live action legacy? What would be your ideal future for Disney live action films?
Really, the start is putting all of them onto Disney Plus.
Agreed.
A lot are not on Disney Plus. And when I started, there's more than when I started this book, which is really when Disney Plus launched. But there's a large number that are not. And there's even like a large number of classic shorts that weren't until recently or still aren't. A lot of them I sort of understand because they have cultural depictions that are extremely outdated throughout the movie. So not just one scene, but maybe the entire movie, but at least give the public a chance to watch them and talk about them. Probably the best known example of this is Song of the South. And I think it's one of those situations where by not releasing the film and making it widely available, you just increase the mystique around it. Because one thing, they only have it for a few movies, but a lot of movies do have the content warning if they include outdated cultural depictions, and they direct you to a website. And some of the movies have a detailed description as to why the content warning is present. For example, you may be watching Swiss Family Robinson and wondering, why does it have this content warning? Mm-hmm. But it explains why in detail. And I think that'd be very helpful because it's not always as obvious as to why.
I think something I would like to see is maybe in this realm, have these Disney live action films get the Turner Classic Movie treatment. Mm-hmm. Where twofold. One, I'd love to see Turner Classic Movies maybe through HBO or on to Disney do like a series like they do on television, where they'll pick let the theme of the day be Disney live action films and have people talk about them.
They did it back quarterly. I know, it was like Treasures from the Disney Vault, and I miss it. It's been at least 5 years since they last did it.
Well, that'd be great to have that back. But also maybe instead of having these cue cards, which are good to have, instead of something to read, and this is the teacher in me coming out, I know people don't read. They're either going to skip through it or they're just going to wait and not actually acknowledge it. So what if some of these films got that 2-minute intro where someone actually talks to you? Because Turner Classic has done that, where they talk about what those depictions are and how to watch this film in context and make it part of the film that maybe you can't skip through. I know that's maybe not a thing, but even if you can sit through it, maybe having someone talk about it, more people would be more likely to listen and hear some of that context about how these films were made, what was deemed acceptable in that time period, or even just a number of these films, just giving them that context, since live action films are ones that aren't so heavily known by the wide range of Disney watchers. Courtney, is there anything that you would want?
I mean, there's just so much. I would love to see the Turner Classic Movies thing come back. I was actually just thinking about that this afternoon. Like, we've been watching a lot of TCM this month because their lineup for like Halloween spooky season is stacked. Not in the Disney regard, obviously, but it's been on my mind. And that's why I went down the rabbit hole of, wait, didn't there used to be a Disney TCM themed night like every few months? And so I don't know if they'd bring it back because now TCM is like really under Warner Brothers and like different studio. Like, we're not going to honor the competition, but like Warner Brothers turned 100 this year. Disney turned 100. Let's all be friends. Like, I think there's ways to celebrate this rich cinematic legacy between both of these companies.
I would like to see some sort of documentaries or similar about Walt as a producer.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
He was extremely active in these live action films, visiting sets, reading scripts, going to storyboard meetings, visiting locations, even if they were remote. He took just as much care into films that some of which are now relatively obscure as he did into major productions and animated films.
I think that'd be interesting. Give it the Imagineering story treatment.
Yes.
But Walt as the producer, I think would be really cool. And then my far-fetched idea, rebuild the Great Movie Ride and make it all Disney live action films.
There you go.
There's space for that.
You can fit Fox in. Fox counts. So there you go. You got some stuff over there as well. Well, I wanted to ask, as we wrap up here and we're celebrating Disney 100 on the day, releasing this the day after, what is your favorite way that Disney has celebrated the centennial so far?
I like how they're even just posting pictures of Walt and Roy back then. And they're really emphasizing just how little the brothers had.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you account for inflation, looking at some of the numbers, they're struggling to get a loan for $200. Which now isn't even a room on Disney property.
Sometimes there's good discounts.
That's
I will
true.
throw that out
I
there.
should say that, and they are having better discounts.
I'd have to agree. I think that's been really something good with the social media lately, is reaching back to Disney's history. But I do really like the emphasis, like you said, on Walt and Roy. That it is the Disney Brothers studio that we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of, and we can't do that without Roy.
I know this just came out on Disney Plus today, but have either of you had a chance to watch Once Upon a Studio? Because I did think of you, Spencer, looking at the credits, like Verna Felton, she's acknowledged because they reused a lot of the original audio in new ways in the short.
I haven't watched it yet. It looks beautiful.
It's so good. I mean, I cried.
I'm going to watch it after this. That was my plan. It was after recording this, I was going to go watch.
I didn't get to watch it live on TV on the celebration Sunday night, but the first thing I did when I came home from work today was watch it with my husband because we both really wanted to watch it. And it's one of those I was like, if you don't watch this without me, I'm going to be really sad.
I'll just go ahead and watch it anyway.
No, we were good and we waited and it was really well done. So I hope both of you enjoy that and our listeners as well.
And all three of us got to go to the Franklin Institute. So we all celebrated the 100th that way as well.
Oh, that's true. I forgot that. That totally counts. That was not together. Well, Emily and I went together, but Spencer, you live right there. So that's a good one too.
Yeah, it did a beautiful job really showing how much has changed versus how much is different. How they still use a lot of the same techniques to make movies as they did, almost a century ago.
So continuing with our celebration, something that's been really fun for us as a book podcast is that there have been several books released for the Disney 100 celebration, both from authors like yourself, also from Disney Editions. Has there been a title that's caught your attention in this last year with new books that have been released?
I'm not sure how new it is, but the one I just read that I absolutely love, it was written by Jim Korkis. It's Off to Neverland, 70 Years of Walt Disney's Peter Pan.
Wonderful. No, I think that was one of his last titles. So we will absolutely count it in honor of Jim Korkis, who we dearly miss and greatly appreciate all of his contributions to Disney scholarship.
And it does a beautiful job going back even into Walt's childhood, up until the making of the movie, and up to the present day.
Very cool. Well, we will keep that on our radar because we are always expanding our library here. For our listeners, please be sure to stay tuned to our social channels for our November selection and episode timing. You can keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse, or email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. You can keep up with me, Courtney, on Instagram at Great Gutsby, or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter, or X, at Emily_McD. And Spencer, where can our readers keep up with you, and where is the best place to buy your books?
The best place is either Amazon.com or BearManorMedia.com. Bear Manor Media is the publisher. And I encourage any Disney fan, anyone listening, to really take a look around Bear Manor Media's website. They have a lot of great books about people very important to the world of Disney. Verna Felton, Paul Frees, who's most known for probably being the Haunted Mansion ghost host, Buddy Baker, and a lot more. So again, Amazon.com and BearManorMedia.com. And then the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. My page is Spencer Wright 19070. And then also the page for my podcast, which is Walt Oasis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll be sure to include all of those in our show notes. And as a second-time visitor here to Book of the Mouse Club, you know the drill. You get to pick the ending quote for us. So what have you selected?
This is a quote from Walt Disney, and he said this to his animators when they were struggling a little bit animating the swamp scene in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He said, "You don't know until you try something."
Oh, I like that. It's a great sentiment to carry on with all we do. There's 100 years of history from Walt and all the magic that he left us, and hopefully hundreds more. So thank you for joining us and being a part of our legacy here on the show today.
Well, thank you very much.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.